So are you one of those people who still uses an equalizer in your system? I love to find out. Hey guys, it's good to see you again. My name is Owen, and if you're happening on this channel for the first time, this is where we sit and we talk about the audio video space, home theater, surround sound, and two-channel audio. Not getting into the weeds in terms of specs, but just talking about the technology and how technology has evolved, and just talking about the everyday uses of the audio video stuff, and offering little tips here and there, if you know what I mean. So my question for you today is, are you still one of those individuals who still uses an equalizer in your two-channel setup? I'd love to hear about that. All right, so for those of you, especially the younger generation, because I never assume that I'm just talking to people in my, I never assume that I'm just talking to individuals in my age group, right? I'm over 60, so I've been around quite a while. I think the better, most of my years are behind me. I love to see another good 20 or 25 years in good health. I digress. Yes, but the equalizer. What was the main purpose of an equalizer? Now, back in the day, especially in the 80s, where I grew up, where I spent a lot of my, teenage years, or, 70s, 80s, when I just started listening to music, getting into the two-channel thing, most people would have an equalizer in the system. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I grew up in the Caribbean, and, I would go to some of these dances. I'm from a country where the sound system was a big thing, right? You'd have all these big sound systems, man, and they would be having all these dances. They're actually parties, but they're called dances, right? And when they started, most of these sound systems would be playing inside buildings. But as they got more powerful, as they became more powerful, the buildings could not contain them anymore, because the bass frequencies would shake down those buildings. That's what I'm driving at, right? You're talking about stadium level bass frequencies, and so they have to move many of these parties or dances outside. Now, when I had the chance to kind of, go to some of these dances, I was always fascinated by the setup, the gear. That's the first place I would go, because in as much as I love the music, I was also fascinated by the gear, and I would love to see what is being implemented into the system. How many power amplifiers, how many preamplifiers, how many, if they're using an EQ, what kind of EQ, how many turntables. Back in those days, it was all about vinyl, turntables, right? Yes, man. And so I was always drawn to the equipment, and I was always drawn to the EQ, because there was something magical about the EQ. In my opinion, you could modify your sound to kind of match, to your taste, to kind of match your taste, depending on the taste that you want, how you want your system or your sound to come across, right? And then you would have some of those equalizers with all the buttons on them. All of these buttons would have different frequencies that you can adjust on the audio spectrum, right? and many of them would have lights on them. And I was a sucker for lights. I love lights. Even today, I still love seeing lights on my equipment, right? So I was fascinated by the EQ. Apart from the power amplifiers and the preamplifiers and the turntables and all the effects boxes and all of those kind of stuff. I was fascinated by the EQ, because you were able to adjust your treble, your mid-range, and your bass and frequencies in between. And so when I owned my first audio system, my little stereo setup, that was one of the piece of equipment that I had to have, if you know what I mean. So, and that is something that I used for many years. I remember back then in the late 70s and most of the 80s, most of the taxis. I'm talking about my home country now. They would have these audio systems in them, right? And they would always, for the most part, would have an EQ attached, a separate EQ equalizer attached to the car radio, right? Because everybody wanted their top end to sound really clean and pristine and just nice. The treble, the tweeters are just singing. You know what I mean? So most of the taxis or the minivans, the public passenger vehicles would have those inside of them. Because I'm from a musical country. We love the music. All right. So, as I said earlier, the EQ was one piece of equipment that I quickly implemented into my first audio setup, and even to this day, I still have an equalizer. Right now, if you should talk to many audiophiles nowadays, or people who are more wiser as it relates to audio. I'm not saying that all audiophiles are wise, but I'm just saying that people who have a better engineering and sound engineering background, they will quickly tell you that the way we used to use the EQ back in the day, when we would have all the keys in a smiley face configuration, high bass and high treble, that kind of stuff, was not the best way to use it, right? And that was the common configuration of how people would kind of have their EQ set up back in the day. All right, extensive bass and extensive treble, right, and a little bit of mid-range. So we love that. We really like that. And like I said, even today I still have an EQ. But I find that over the years, the EQ or the equalizer is not a commonplace thing anymore in audio systems. Just to back up a little bit. So the equalizer, what are some of the main purpose of the equalizer? And this is just my opinion, right? I think one of the main purpose of the equalizer is just to modify your sound. You modify your sound to get it a way that you like it. Modify different frequencies, bass frequencies, mid-range frequencies, and treble frequencies, or frequencies in between, to get a sound that you enjoy listening to. That is how that was the main focus of the equalizer when I was a young guy listening music, and that's the way it was commonly implemented, so to speak. But apart from that, the equalizer can be used in more of a professional way. For example, you use an equalizer to kind of enhance certain frequencies and to diminish other frequencies. For example, there might be a hum in your system, right? Or a buzz or something. Depending on how bad it is, you could possibly use an equalizer to kind of diminish that frequency or that buzz or that hum in the system. And so, until you're able to figure out what is causing it, you could still, enjoy your music, enjoy listening to your music. All right. So that was, from a more professional level, was a good way to kind of, use an equalizer. And, but also, as technology has evolved over the years, you not only have the hardware equalizer, the hardware EQs that I kind of alluded to in this video, but you also have software EQ. In many software, even in today's modern equipment, modern amplifiers, these all-in-one systems, many of them are still implementing software equalizers that you can modify to your taste, modify your music to your taste. But like I said, more and more, I don't see people gravitating towards equalizers anymore. I don't see people, implementing equalizers into their system anymore. The purist would say that, you should leave your music, you should enjoy your music as it is. So if you're playing back a CD or a vinyl, the best way to enjoy it is just transmitting the audio in its purest form and unadulterated form to your speakers, from your amps to your speakers. That is how a lot of people would kind of what a lot of people would emphasize these days, that is how music should be listened to without it being unadulterated. This is a tongue twister. Without the music being modified. Let's use that word, modified, in any way. And for more, more or less, that is how I have been listening to music. So while I still do own an equalizer, I don't use it anymore for that purpose in terms of modifying my sound. I still have it in my system, but all I use it to do, because it has the EQ that I have. When I say EQ, I'm talking about an equalizer. That's just a short way of saying equalizer. The EQ that I have, it also have a spectrum analyzer built into it. So I get these beautiful dancing spectrums whenever, which would, each spectrum would be highlighting a different frequency as my music is playing. And I love seeing that. So that is how I use my equalizer these days. Not to modify my music per se, but just to see that, the musical spectrum being displayed. It gives me a visual representation of what is going on in my audio system. Yeah, but what about you? I think there might be something that I may forgot as it relates to more software environment, software equalizers. You would have pre-programmed sound environments, right? And these environments are EQ'd a certain way. I'm talking about in software now, and you can switch from one environment to the next, depending on what you're using, or the piece of software that you're using. to kind of replicate certain environments, whether it be a stadium, a concert hall, whether it be a jazz club, that kind, that kind of stuff. So you would have the EQ settings in software to kind of replicate those listening environments. Yeah. So the question is, what about you? Are you still using a physical EQ in your system? What about a software EQ? Are you implementing a software EQ into your system? I love to hear. Because like I said, for me, I don't really use an EQ again to modify my sound. I haven't been doing that a while. I think I may kind of experiment with it again to go back and relive some of those days. But for the most part, I'm listening to music on without it being modified at all. I mean, when it comes down to it, your music is modified somewhat. Once it leaves your CD player and it goes through your amplifier, there is a little bit of modification happening. It's not totally unadulterated sound. This word is a tongue twister. Yeah, but for the most part, though, that is how I'm listening to music these days, without it being modified by an equalizer at all. Just straight from the CD, straight through my amplifier. I may adjust the tone controls a little bit, and that's the most that I'll do. But for the most part, the music is untouched. But how are you listening to your music? I'm asking, do you still use a physical EQ? Do you use a software EQ? And what were your experiences using EQ? Do you think we should go back to the good old days of EQing our music, changing up our frequencies to kind of to the way we love it? Let me hear your thoughts. All right, that's it for today, guys. I just like to reminisce on these topics from time to time. If you love this video, give me a thumbs up, and if you're enjoying this channel, don't forget to subscribe. All right. So until the next video, let me hear your feedback, and let's go from there. All right. Have a great day, and you take care of yourself now. All right. Bye-bye.